Hello, everyone. My name is Shelby. I'm a mental health care doctor, and welcome to my podcast, Tell Me Something New. I'm joined by Zach, who's going to come on and tell us a new idea. I'm really excited to have him. Thank you, Zach, for coming to my podcast. And before we get started, I just wanted to give you a cool opportunity to introduce yourself. You could probably do it better than I would. So if you want to talk just a little bit about what you do, and then I can also share a little bit about how, what context we met, and then we can go into it.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. So I'll share a little bit about what I do. I'll share about what I enjoy doing and those things. So I do music and event planning, kind of the two things that I've been passionate about over the last few years. And for my music, I have a few different projects. I do different types of sound healing through electronic ambient music. I also make and produce more kind of down-tempo dance music. And I have a project with my friend where we do all improvised electronic music called Unfolding. And my music project is called Zenglish. And with my music, it kind of intertwines with like the events that I plan because they tend to be around music, art, and wellness. I think those three things kind of blend together nicely and can bring in different walks of life into a space that they may not have seen themselves going. But since it's offering this certain thing, they feel more inclined to come. So, yeah, that's a little bit about myself.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I recall going to one of those amazing events, and actually more than one. And absolutely, sound healing is wonderful, and I love that you're a sound healer, and I love that you're such a creative mind, and your music is wonderful. And I just remember the experience that I went to being in this just state of amazing relaxation, surrounded by wonderful sounds. And I sort of went into sort of like a meditative trance. I think it's really, really cool what you're able to do with your music and with your sound healing. Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. And actually, one of the new thought that I'm going to share towards the end of the podcast was a new thought that came to me during that recent experience that you put on. And so I figured it was appropriate to share it just in the context of us having this conversation. I will get to that in a little bit, but at this point, I'd love to hear, I mean, I sort of approached you and I said, hey, Zach, here's my podcast idea. Is there any new thoughts or things that you'd like to talk about, things that, are new to you or that you've been thinking about lately? So without further ado, can you tell us a little bit about something new?
Yeah, I feel like there's a few things that have been on my mind recently and over the last couple months. We'll start. The first one that's kind of been on my mind over the last couple months or so has been, connection and what that means. And I don't know if this is necessarily like a groundbreaking new thought, but it's just something that's been, in my mind and how important connection is and how I believe connection is the foundation of life and creation. So that's kind of what led me to start creating these events called Harmonic Connection that I am now going to be on my third iteration of doing and bringing people together to connect, as I said earlier, through music, art, different wellness practices, so they can meet other like-minded individuals and also connect deeper with themselves. And these are all in like a sober space so people can be, their true authentic self and really bridge that deep connection. Because the first, connection starts with yourself. If you're not connected with yourself, it's going to be harder to connect with another person.
Completely.
So I've just been trying to create spaces for that and just been thinking about, what it really means to connect and how you can connect, whether that's, through meditation, through dance, um, through listening to music, nature. I know going out in nature and dancing and music are big for me to connect, especially since I feel like with music, it's such a anchor point. I was talking about this with somebody the other day. Um, it's something that can bring all different types of people together um, that necessarily would never meet each other, and then that can spark a connection. Um, and I guess another thing that has been on my mind is which was kind of what one of my last events was about, of listening, like the art of listening, and how important that is, and how those both kind of bridge together, connection and listening. And the better you become at listening, um, the more in tune and more you can connect with your body and other people. And I feel like that's been a practice for me over, the last couple of years, and even more recently. Um, the more I can listen and connect with myself, the more like creative ideas start to flow through me, and I see, my life unfolding in the way I want it to.
That's awesome. Thank you. I just loved hearing you talk and reflect and sort of share your creative process with me. Thank you so much. Then I remember at the beginning you said, I don't know if this is a groundbreaking idea, and again, that's okay. And maybe in a way, just hearing you, I was like, oh, this is pretty groundbreaking. At least to me, I thought it was pretty cool, just because I think what you're talking about is really, really, it's just really deep stuff. I mean, you're talking about finding harmony through connection. And at least that's kind of the first thing that I heard you reflect on, was this idea of creating a harmonious space in community and within an individual so that they can connect internally and externally. And then I heard kind of, as you kind of expanded your idea and your creative thought process, I sort of heard this idea of connecting through listening, and connecting to ourselves through listening, and connecting to others through listening, which I thought was so beautiful. And sort of I'm kind of connecting the two in my mind too. And this is why I love this kind of back and forth, is because I'm now starting to think in a different way. And I've never really connected, the idea of like harmony and listening, and connection being the mediator between the two. I think that through listening, maybe kind of to play off your idea, we can become more harmonious, and I love that word of harmony. And it just instills this idea of peace and interconnectivity and wellness, and all of that wonderful stuff that you're trying to do. So I think what you're talking about is super, super incredible. And I'm just kind of curious, can you talk a little bit about when your ideas tend to come to you? Because, and this has been an ongoing process, of course, but you mentioned that as you've engaged in your work, the creative ideas are sort of flowing through you, and you feel like your world is kind of opening up. I just kind of imagine this like opening flower or something kind of like that. And that's kind of similar to what I feel like is happening with me with this whole podcast idea, is that cool expression of creativity. I feel like it allows you to open up yourself in a new way. So can you just talk a little bit about how your creative process has allowed you to develop yourself, and when perhaps, these ideas are coming to you, or like how do they come to you? Do they come to you while you're listening to music, or is it something else?
Yeah. So my ideas come to me in kind of a variety of different ways. It can be as simple as just like being in my car driving somewhere and a thought pops in my head. Um, or being in nature definitely sparks a lot of creativity for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at least musically. I mean, in other ways too, but I try musically. I get a lot of inspiration um, from nature. So normally, like when I'm going out on a walk or a hike, I get ideas. Um, Sometimes before, like I'm getting ready to go to bed and to sleep, I have that idea pop in my head.
Me too.
I either get it or I lose it.
Same,
Uh,
me too. If I write it down, if I don't write it down, I'll lose
yeah,
it.
yeah. Even like even through dreams, sometimes um, I'll have ideas. So it's yeah, it's not one way. It's a variety of different things, and yeah, I guess the better I become at listening and kind of trying to get rid of the excess noise, um, the easier it is for me to get those like creative ideas to me.
Yeah. And can you share sort of when you say listening? Listening can mean a million different things to a million different people. What
Yeah.
does it mean to you?
Um, to me, listening is not, I don't do this all the time. I probably should get better at it, but just taking a moment in my day and sitting there and doing nothing and just listening to my body and what's around me and my thoughts is a one form of practice, but also listening is being present and like not trying to be distracted by you know the thousands of things we can be distracted by nowadays. Like especially I feel like it's our phones are the most distracting things for us now. So yeah, trying to be mindful of that and yeah, just be present with my life because I think that is one of the most important aspects of listening is being present and giving your attention.
Absolutely, absolutely. I appreciate you reflecting on what that means to you. And I think so often, at least for me, I've thought about listening in the context of listening to other people or other things, and not necessarily always just listening to myself. And I think, at least on my end, my creative process of creating this idea of doing a podcast about Tell Me Something New is encouraging people to listen to themselves a little bit more. I think kind of at the first podcast I made, I talked about the idea that I love self-help books, and I've read a million, that's an exaggeration, but I've read many, many self-help books, and I've learned so many different concepts from them. And well, what I realized is I was listening, and this isn't a bad thing necessarily, but I was listening to other people's ideas and sort of in absorbing other people's ideas and other people's way of thinking. And sometimes it almost can become addictive when you're always looking for a difference of opinion. And I was like, maybe I should listen to myself a little bit more and listen to what is my underlying thought process like? What am I spending time focusing and thinking on? And in doing so, I started to connect a little bit more with my own creativity, which I thought was a really interesting process. And then going back to the distractions, having these constant distractions, I really do think, as you mentioned, having the social media and just the constant distraction of the phone or whatever media it is, maybe social media, maybe news outlets, whatever, email, it can be very distracting because we're really, being peppered all day with, different forms and streams of information. It can be very hard sometimes to have that clarity and have that moment of pause and stepping away and allowing yourself to really listen, not only to your mind, but to your actual body. And I think that's such an important skill to talk about and just to name and just to encourage people to do, because it's, I think if you don't make space for it, it's so easy to go a full 24 hours, a full week, a full year, really just not connecting to your inner dialogue and your inner self. And so I think that's a wonderful practice that you have. And it's a practice that I'm finding myself doing more and more and more. And I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about something that came to me, a new idea that came to me while we were doing one of your sort of sound healing. I don't know. I call it a soundscape. Would soundscape make sense, or is it more? I don't know. That's my own.
Yeah, I call them soundscape journeys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
soundscape journey. Yeah, yeah, which is so cool. I love the idea of like a soundscape journey. It was just so fun. But you had a soundscape journey, and I was laying there, and I was just absorbing all of these different wonderful harmonious harmonic sounds, and there was nature, and there was this ambiance of like sort of a meditative, I don't know, cocoon. This is what it felt like. It felt like I was enveloped in this sound experience. I remember whatever you did with the setup was amazing because there was sounds in front of me, up here, up back there. I mean, it was just like I was completely surrounded. So it was really cool how you did that. I thought that was fantastic. Um, I was in a very relaxed state, and I can't remember all of what happened because I was so relaxed that I kind of forgot what was said. But I know that there was a lot of sort of affirmations being said and ideas being shared, and I was listening and I was just absorbing. And I started to reflect quite openly about a fear that I was having, actually. And so my brain started to become curious about a fear that I was having during that process where you were guiding us through. And I was sort of thinking about a situation in my life that causes a bit of fear. And I think that, just as a kind of a preface to this, I think that fear is a completely normal and welcomed emotion, and something I really want to do on my podcast is encouraging and normalizing the full range of human emotions, and not sort of saying one's bad or one's good, or you should be this way, you should be that way. I don't necessarily buy into that. I think every emotion has a very important role. Fear being, an anxiety-based emotion that kind of evolved to keep us safe, and fear is actually very adaptive in many ways. But as we've gone forward as a society, so often we find ourselves with fearfulness of things perhaps that are more psychological or more fears based in our egos. And the fear that I was experiencing and reflecting on during that soundscape journey was very much one of those fears. It wasn't a real lived physical danger. It was a sort of a psychological one. And I don't have to even go into the details of what it was, more so just the process of what I thought. And so I was thinking, why am I afraid of this situation? Why does it cause me anxiety? What's going on? I was being really curious, which I thought was really cool because I was reflecting on it without that sense of tension because I was so relaxed, thanks to your soundscape. And what sort of came to my mind was the 5W questions, the who, what, when, where, why. That's like what started to come up for me. And I was thinking, am I afraid of a person, a who? Not really. Am I afraid of a what, like a thing? Not really. Am I afraid of a when, or like a time that might be happening in the future? Not really. Or a situation, a where? Not really. And I realized that the fear was coming from a why. And I thought that was interesting to think about because so often we have these fears, and it's not necessarily a person, place, time, or situation. It's really an ideological fear. And I think my fear, or my why, in recognizing what I was actually worried about, allowed me to gain a little bit of perspective and allowed me to recognize that I had some more control over it than I thought that I did. And I had a little bit more perspective over it than I thought that I did. It makes sense to be afraid of, I don't know, someone down a dark alleyway, a who, or, being afraid of a place like you're at a height and you have a fear of heights, or you're afraid of a bad outcome happening in the future, like, losing someone. Like, those all make complete and total sense. Those are normal feelings. But I think when we really get curious about the why behind them, we can kind of start to distinguish the optionality of it. Sometimes fear is optional. And I realized in that setting, what I was worried about was very much optional, and it had a lot more to do with my own sort of ego and mind than anything external to me. And so I hope that kind of makes sense. That's sort of what came to me, and I don't think I would have been able to have that thought without sort of being in that more relaxed state where I was really willing to explore the idea without kind of getting like further lost in my own ego story or further lost in my own stream of thoughts, because I was able to just look at the thought and just be relaxed about it. So I wanted to say thank you because that was really cool. And I think I learned something through that process.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. And that it definitely makes sense to me. What you're talking about from like that psychological fear standpoint. I think a lot of people can relate to that, myself included. We make these stories. It's like kind of future tripping where we make these stories up in our
Future.
mind that haven't even happened yet, and then it makes us have anxiety or become fearful of it. And when you're in that space of being relaxed and your mind's at ease, you can start to see that, like, oh, this is just like some psychological story I've been telling myself. It's I can let go of this attachment that hasn't even happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And something as we're talking that I'm also sort of reflecting on is that there's very few instances where I explore a fear-based or a negative emotion when I'm in a really positive, relaxed state. I think normally when the fear comes on, it's actually in the midst of the situation at hand and it's actually happening. And it's very hard sometimes to connect with your deeper self and your deeper wisdom and perspective when you're in a fight or flight mode, because your body's in a fight or flight mode. I mean, we have the same caveman brain that we had millions of years ago, and we still apply some of that emotional and physiological thinking to situations of fear, right? We have fear reactions to things that physically cannot harm us, right? But it's a very real emotion. And that's being human. That's normal. That's completely normal. But it's so often that I only connect with my fear or my anxiety in the acute state. And I thought it was really, really cool that I was able to connect with that part of myself in a state that was very different and distinct from what I normally do, being that I was relaxed in a calm room, in a calm environment, calm in my body, listening in this harmonious connection with people around me and sound around me. And it felt like a cocoon. It was really, really cool. And so I think your type of sound healing, it really does create breakthroughs for people. And so for me, I consider my thought as sort of an additional breakthrough thought. It really helped me gain some perspective over a situation in my life that was troubling me. And I hope that I can remember that lesson and kind of carry it forward, and just think about it in that way. And it'll definitely motivate me to go to more sound healings, because I do think this is a process of healing. So anyways, I think that is most of what I wanted to share, and I wanted to thank you for taking your time out of your day, and I just have a lot of gratitude, and I'm very excited for you and all of your creative work. I think you really touch and help people, and I really, really appreciate it. And I'm just curious, is there anything else that came up for you, or anything else that you wanted to share? And if not, that's okay.
Not particularly. I mean, I'm just, yeah, really grateful that you asked me to come on and be a part of this podcast. Really haven't done a podcast in a while, and yeah, it's a fun way to explore your thoughts and be able to talk to another person. So I think what you're doing is awesome, and excited to see you continue this and watch it grow.
Thanks. Me too. We'll see where it goes. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
But if it affects anyone positively, then I'm really, really happy. And I've been having fun. And I just, again, I think these conversations are so cool. And ultimately, I think they're helpful. And hopefully someone out there listening finds them helpful as well. So again, thank you, Zach, for your time. Appreciate you so much. And hopefully other people will hear this and maybe want to come on and talk to me about their new thoughts and tell me something new. So hope you have a great day and take care.
Yeah,
Bye.
you as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.